Welcome to the Conscious Living Podcast, conversations to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. An uplifting and inspiring series of conversations and talks with your host, Jackie Woodside. We are educating minds, empowering lives, and enlightening souls to create a world where love prevails. In this engaging podcast, we deliver exciting, positive, transformative talks and teachings designed to elevate your life. Now, let's join our host, Jackie Woodside, for this week's session.
Hi there, Jackie Woodside here, founder and the host of the Conscious Living Podcast, strategies to live more consciously with time, money, and yes, life itself. We are here to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. I love this podcast. I love talking to people about living life more consciously. I love being engaged with people around conversations for what matter. In fact, that's pretty much all that I'm interested in talking about. You know, I play basketball and racquetball several nights a week, and I love hanging out with my club buddies, my basketball buddies, my racquetball buddies, because it's fun to just get together and play. But when I really want to connect, it's just being with people on this podcast, in my courses, being guests on other people's platforms, where we can really dive deep and have meaningful conversations. So that's what I seek to bring to you every Tuesday at the Conscious Living Podcast. I'm really excited to bring to the show today someone who I find just really fascinating, who is both, and get this, a Jungian trained psychotherapist and a career coach. Put those two together and make sense of it. Dr. Toni Galardi is someone who is the author of a couple very, very fascinating books. She's also someone who has a really interesting path of going through a lot of what she calls lifequakes, wake-up moments, what one could perceive as tragic experiences that she has turned into a beautiful lesson and series of stories to educate and empower other people. She's the author of her books Lifequake and Breastquake, and we're going to be talking about both of those today. Thank you, Dr. Toni, for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you today, Jackie.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say about your path, your journey, to flesh out a little bit more about who you are for our listeners?
Maybe just briefly that
Sure.
what part of being a career coach, I took my training as a psychotherapist, my PhD training, and parlayed it into 11 different careers. And so that's part of what I love to do, is to help people find what is soul driven for them now.
Wow, 11 different careers.
Yeah. I've been.
Was that including before your academic career and getting your PhD?
No, after. After.
You don't look nearly old enough to have 11 different careers under your belt and a PhD, mind you very much. How did you do all that?
Very kind. Some of those things were done all at the same time. So I've been a writer for many years. I've had a column called Ask the Lifequake Doctor that was in Counselor magazine for many years. I was an assistant college professor. I've always had a private practice. I've kept that in place, and I've always been a speaker and a writer. Okay. One of the things I got from my Jungian training was how I use astrology to help people actually manage changes so that they know when to make changes and to be able to kind of maximize opportunities and not to do things during periods when it'll be a waste of time. So that's another part of that Jung was a big proponent of as well. So.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's really fascinating. Yeah. So you kind of coined this phrase, lifequakes. I love it. You've kind of just gone through one. I will say, is to keep this contemporary. We are in early October, and Dr. Toni lives in Asheville, North Carolina, has just survived a massive, massive hurricane that devastated the entire city of Asheville and the surrounding region. So you can go there if you want, but I want to invite you to talk to us a little bit about this notion of lifequakes and your a little bit more intimate experience with lifequakes than maybe you wanted of having gone through many of them. So let's go there, wherever, any place of that you want to dive in.
Okay. So my joke was I could be the poster child for the change impaired, because I myself had fear about making changes and went through 3 near-death experiences over the course of 20 years. And each time it was because when I look back on it, there were signs. I was being given signs that it's time to leave that job. And I was working on, my first job was on Skid Row, and I sensed that things were getting more dangerous. This is Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And told my boss, we need to get a security guard. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. He just moved here from Pittsburgh. I can take care of things. And guy got through screening who was high on PCP. And I didn't know that. And he started making a ruckus in our waiting room. And I asked him to kind of leave, and he flipped out, took me by the neck, and tried to choke me to death. And when I arrived at the emergency room, there were, handprints from where he had tried to strangle me. So what followed that was a lot of PTSD. We didn't know, there wasn't a label for that in that way at the time. And I was waking up in the middle of the night with nightmares, which led me to go into therapy. And from going into therapy, I loved what my therapist was doing. I thought it was fascinating, this process of helping people move through these transformational times that often start as a crisis. And she said, I think you'd be great at this, So I went to grad school. I went to Chapman University in Orange, California. And that began a whole other part of my career, which is where I got my Jungian training. And so then when my training as a psychotherapist, and I was in private practice and I was doing very well, but something was draining me. And it was time to make another change, and I was afraid. And what happened, I was in a car accident, 3 car accidents in a 6-day period, actually. And one of them I almost died in. So there were all these periods of time that when I looked back, there was preparation. And so in a moment, very deep, we're talking 30 some odd years ago, I was in a deep state of transition and trying to figure out what to do with my life. I had walked away from my practice, had this career, and just said, I don't believe in it. It takes too long. This psychotherapy thing takes too long. And went on this kind of journey. And that's where I found shamanism, energy healing, and all those things served me during this hurricane, because all of the preparation I've had through the years of teaching people how to look for signs and how to get into a place of adaptability, agility, right? And preparation. Now, most people who were preparing for this hurricane, first of all, nobody knew it was going to hit like this. There's devastation. It looked like an atom bomb has hit the city. And they weren't expecting this level because it had never happened to Asheville. But I intuited that things were going to be bad. And I started doing energy work, and I started working with the winds and calling in higher beings, because I do believe we have access to beings that can support us. You can call them angels, you can call them whatever, but they definitely came in, and I asked them to hold up the trees. And there's trees all around us. Well, the trees to the left and to the right of us went down, and we never lost water. We lost a lot. We have to boil everything and whatnot, but I did a lot of preparation because I have this stage model that I developed called the Lifequake repurposing method. And it's a way of being able to help you first prepare for change and then discover what you're supposed to do next. What is your calling now? And that's what that became. And then 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had felt this lump in my breast, my left breast, went for the biopsy, and the breast cancer surgeon, when we were looking at the scans, said to me, your tumor is in the shape of a heart. She said, a cracked heart, actually. And I said, really, a cracked heart? And she said, yeah, 2 tumors merged together. Well, in that moment, she wanted to rush me off to an oncologist. And in that moment, I knew this was emotional, that I lived such a clean life and had such great stress management skills and whatever, but I had gone through loss after loss after loss. I'd lost 5 major people in my life, in the previous few years, and had not had time, because I had moved from California to Asheville, North Carolina, to process a lot of that grief. I literally hit the ground running, and all of that got stuck in my body. So I told God, the universe, that if I can reverse this holistically, which, by the way, it was reversed 70% of its original size in 3 months. without surgery, radiation, or chemotherapy. And I did my research, and said to the divine, I will write a book about this in terms of what people need to know. So there's aspects of this book that deal with the data, all the data we have about how, if you're in a bad marriage, the impact that has on breast cancer. There's higher rates of women in trapped relationships who get breast cancer. There's just like a lot of information that I put in this book, and that book came out last year and became an international bestseller. So I hope that kind of encapsulates everything.
Breastquake, and I believe it's October. Is this not Breast Cancer Awareness Month?
It is. It
Yeah.
is indeed. It
Okay,
is.
That's great. So, you've been through a lot, clearly.
Mhm.
Do you want to say more about what you said you developed your method? I would love to hear more about that.
So there's the first stage of a
What
life.
was it called again, Dr. Toni?
The name of is called the Lifequake Repurposing Method.
Repurposing method. That's what I wanted.
It's all in the book, The Lifequake Miracle. This book here, The Lifequake Miracle. And I reference it in the book Breastquake as well. So the first stage of this model is boredom. What most people don't realize that there's because I track it in my clients, I've seen it saw it in myself, that there's an emotion that is what we call the transition emotion on the emotional tone scale. On the emotional tone scale, the highest emotion is ecstasy. We consider the lowest emotion as despair. Right in the middle is this transition emotion. There's a lot of emotions in between. There's this transition emotion called boredom. And I'm not talking about chronic boredom. I'm talking about things, it can be even the exercise that you've been doing suddenly is no longer, you might be getting injuries. You might be more exhausted after you do it. Your career could have been a career you loved at one time, and now it's draining you. So that boredom becomes the first stage, and it's very subtle. And most people, what they do is they just kind of buckle down and do more. Like, I just have to work harder, at my relationship or the career or wherever the lifequake is happening. And sometimes people start eating a little more, maybe having an extra glass of wine, it's very subtle. Then if you do nothing and you just keep trying to do more of the same, it moves down into depression. And that's stage 2 of depression. That's when addiction starts to really take hold. If it hasn't already, if it hasn't been an issue for you. People who've been in recovery sometimes relapse during this stage. And this is the stage where you feel like nothing feels good. Nothing excites you, blah, blah, blah. And then stage 3 is the crisis. It's when something comes in that severs the life you've lived. And that can be you're fired from your job. That can be your husband or wife walks out on you, right? It can be any number one of these things that shake you to your core, that open you up. I coined the term lifequake 30 some odd years ago, because what I see it as the soul waking up, but it's waking up to the next level of its evolution. And so let me just go through quickly so then stage 4 is after kind of the aftermath, where you're in this big transition and the life you've had is gone. Yeah. And it's often characterized as a dark night of the soul, which you don't know. There's this feeling. And if you do the work, if you do the excavation work of really digging deep into old trauma, could be childhood trauma that's never been addressed, and all the things, whatever might have been suppressed, it could have been a desire to do something with your life that you got talked out of by your parents. My dentist got her bachelor's degree in radio and TV. And although she's a good dentist, she talks a lot about media during the appointments. And I find myself wondering, did somebody talk you out? She's Asian, and did someone talk you out of your dream, to go into media? So again, that will wake you up to, what do I really deeply want, And so that's a profound stage 4. And in that stage, toward the end, because all these overlap, toward the end of stage 4, coming into stage 5 is when, if you've taken the time to get still and quiet and just say to spirit and to your own higher self, show me, what would you have me do next? And little by little, messages will start to come through of just what you're supposed to, what's the next thing to do. So stage 5 is, I think of it as an experimentation stage of trying things, and it may be that you try a bunch of different things, and it can take a while before you figure out what it is that's meant to be the thing that clicks for you. But it's kind of like an internship. I have a client right now who was a big financial analyst and walked away, was just like went into burnout in her late 50s and walked away from her career and spent a couple of years just drifting. She had the money to do that. And now, well, as we were working together, the thing that she has always loved is travel. And so she started to do kind of things for friends, putting together travel itineraries. And we've been talking about, what I've said to her is, you could become literally a concierge consultant so that you really help someone design a trip, a vacation or whatever, that is really what they would love to do, And so we started to really craft this. Well, then she hit this resistance, because how could I be a travel consultant? I don't make that much money. I'm not going to make that much money. It's not very glamorous. What I did was very glamorous, right? So there's all this ego stuff that can happen in this stage while you're reconfiguring what you're here to do. When I brought in astrology and energy healing, I was terrified that people would think I wasn't credible as a psychotherapist because I was using astrology, that I'd be seen as like a tarot card reader or something. And so it took a while for me to get the courage to start just experimenting with, taking my clients' birth dates and looking and seeing if it paralleled, if certain transits were showing up in their lives, as really showing movement or change in some way. And I started seeing, wow, this stuff has empirical value. And so I included that in my work and went public, got out of the closet with it. So stage 5 is that experimentation stage. Stage 6 is really the stage of seeing abundance from a whole different point of view. And I tell a story of these twins, and it's an old story, that these twins go into this to a stable. Their dad takes them to a stable, and where the horses are, and they go into where there's this big haystack, and one of the twins looks at the haystack, digs through the haystack and sees all of the fertilizer that I call fertilizer, that is the horse excrement, and sees it as a fertilizer. Like, we could use this for something, for a garden or something. And the other kid says, there's, merda, there's the French word merda everywhere, and that's all he sees is the shit. So it's a perspective. And that's what stage 6 is about. Can you see the things in your life? Like right now, there's a hurricane that's hit, right? I've been practicing looking for, what is the gift here? What's the abundance that's present for me, as I'm going through this stage, and seeing that fertile possibility for all the people in Asheville who are in so much grief right now. There's so much sadness out there. So then stage 7 is the marriage of the micro with the macro, which is taking what you've mastered in terms of personal change, how to develop personal change, and taking it to the global level. Like, how can you make a difference on the global scale? There's an expression, think globally, act locally. So then there's building blocks I have for each of these stages, like things to master that are building blocks. And the building block for stage 7 is altruism. And I give all the data we have that when when your immune system is actually strengthened by doing volunteer work, by helping others, by giving to others. And that's happening in Asheville right now in spades, people really reaching out and helping others. It's been so moving to see the best in human beings coming out.
Mhm.
So that's the last stage, is that, you know, that we're meant to be that when we master personal change, we're going to shift this kind of global paradigm of waiting until our hair's on fire before we make changes. And that's what I'm passionate about, is helping people find their calling, find the authenticity they need in their life before it completely has to become catastrophic crisis.
Mhm. Yep. And do you feel like if people don't go down that path of discovering their soul's purpose, it does end up being some kind of a crisis eventually?
Often it does. Yeah, often it
But
does.
not always. Sometimes people just kind of skim through, kind of asleep, going through the motions, and it doesn't end up as a crisis. But I guess you're saying, think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's the highest level self-actualization, but then he later actually wrote a piece about transcendence, which is the step beyond self-actualization. So
Yes.
I guess you're pointing to the journey that you just described of identifying and fulfilling one's soul's purpose as being that path to self-actualization and transcendence.
Yeah, I think, yes, there are people who are still asleep and will stay
Oh,
asleep,
100%.
and
The
they'll
majority.
die asleep. Yes, absolutely.
Dr. Toni, you and I are, we're so steeped in this, right? Everybody that you and I talk to are kind of awakened people, and the
Right.
people listening to this podcast are people that are really awake and care about awakening. But, like I said, I'm a racquetball and basketball player, and hanging out there, or just, any place, have a family reunion, or hang out with the guys that are working on my rock wall and doing repairs out front.
Yes.
Most people, just last night at basketball, there was a new gal that showed up, sweet, really lovely woman. And she's a nurse practitioner. So she was asking me what I do for a living. And when I was explaining about being a consciousness coach and consciousness teacher, and I do executive training and leadership development from a consciousness perspective. And she's like, well, wasn't exactly sure what that meant. And I said, well, it's really understanding that you create your life from the inside out based on your beliefs and your perspectives. And that when you learn to master those things, life is, completely different. And she was just like, that's amazing. Everybody needs that. Everybody needs that. I was like, yeah, well, everybody does need that, but not everybody knows they need that. Right.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
when you're, I love what you said, like, think globally, act locally. I do think globally. I know you do as well.
Mhm.
How do we, how do we be in the face of that most people aren't on that soul's journey of
Mhm.
awakening? I don't know, what more can we do to create an awakened world according to your model?
Modeling, just
Modeling it, just being
being,
it, doing
being,
like I did last night, like actually talking about what I do and not sugarcoating it in any way.
being courageous,
Yeah.
being willing to speak your truth. And I think you can do that with kindness.
Yeah.
And I think the world needs more kindness. We're in a time right before an election and on and on. And so the more that we can, I think, with differing points of view, that we can stay in kindness with each other and compassion with each other, and empathy with each other is a huge,
What you're
huge.
saying, and I love it, particularly juxtaposed to the election that, season that we're in. I was just this week invited already. I was invited to an inauguration event for Kamala Harris, which I was excited about, and it's being hosted by a spiritual community. And the only instruction is everyone must wear purple
I love it.
to signify oneness. Don't wear red, don't wear blue.
I love it.
Come.
Where is this? Where are you located?
I am in Massachusetts. The host of that event is in DC, but they have spiritual centers around the world, so I don't know yet where it's going to be. It's sometime in January, and I'm happy to pass that on to you.
Love to. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm super, super excited about it. But I loved that notion, it speaks to what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
not about party affiliation, it's about what kind of person are you being in the face of everything that we're all facing with the hurricanes. We've just completed, the South went through Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Milton is landing, in the next couple of days. the political hurricanes that we're going through, the environmental hurricanes that we're going through. It's a lot. It's an intense time to be alive. And I love that your model focuses on people kind of coming into their soul's purpose. Because apart from what you do for a living, which I do think there's a certain level of goodness of fit and samadhi of your soul's expression through work, I also believe that at a soul level, we are just here to grow in consciousness, to be more kind, more loving,
Yes.
more patient, more focused on oneness and less on separation. And
Absolutely.
yeah, anything you want to add to that?
What comes to mind is my Italian grandmother,
Okay.
wherever she is, because she had a fourth grade education and was one of the kindest, most loving people, and came to this country terrified, and with her husband and a child, my father, and just spread kindness wherever she was, even though she didn't even speak the language.
Right.
So I think about her as a model for just being your sweetest self wherever you can be.
It's beautiful. Dr. Toni, I had that grandmother too.
Oh, really?
If I had another career to fulfill, and perhaps I do, at some point in my life, I would write my grandmother's life story, and it would be entitled, They Called Her Grace. Her name was Grace.
Oh, yeah.
Although my grandmother was a woman ahead of her time, she was actually college educated back in that day, which was very unusual. But lost her husband and two sons in 9 months in 3 separate car accidents.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And and was just through all of that, and then remarried 12 years later, and her new husband's son died in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
I mean, just a stunning story. And then
Mm.
ended up years later with Alzheimer's disease and was in a care facility for 15 years. And then when she finally passed, I thought, there'll be a handful of people at the wake. It'll be, my aunt and uncle and my brothers and sisters and my cousins, and, there'll be a handful of family members. There was a line out the door at her memorial service, and every single person had a story to tell.
You should definitely write that book.
I know. It would be a beautiful movie. It would,
Yeah.
would really be a beautiful movie. So yeah, thank you for saying that. And kudos to your grandmother as well. I think maybe this isn't true, but I often think, was it easier to be kind when life was simpler? And I don't know that that's true, but I do think that the amount of neurological stress that people are under in this information age of constant bombardment of what's happening all around the world. And of course, for whatever reason, we don't gravitate toward just telling good news. We are bombarded with tragedies and difficult stories and people's traumas in life. It's bombarded with it. We are bombarded with it. And I do think neurologically it makes it more challenging to be a high vibe, high consciousness, open, loving, kind person. So I'm grateful.
Meditation helps a lot, with that.
So key. Say a little bit more about that.
So, there's a lot of data. And if for people who can't still the mind, there are things like Yoga Nidra, which definitely you can get on YouTube. A very good friend of mine does free meditations every Monday. johnvossler.com. And Qigong is another powerful way to, again, reprogram the nervous system. Friend of mine by the name of Daniela Carraro does Qigong classes online, with groups of people from Italy, actually, to California and various places. So
wonderful.
So meditation, I do a meditation practice every morning upon awakening, helps to kind of ground your nervous system so that you can be more adaptive. For me, what I have found, especially during this hurricane, I had needed to cut out caffeine. Even though I was down to drinking green tea, it was still just amping me up a little too much. So I'm drinking Tulsi, Tulsi, Tulsi tea, which is an Indian tea that supports your adrenal glands right now. So when you're in a time of stress, making sure ashwagandha is a wonderful herb for nourishing the adrenals as well, helping you be more, the adaptogenic herbs will help with adapting to change. So anything like that that allows the nervous system to just settle back down is very powerful.
So I love that you bring such practical, dropping your friends' resources, dropping those nutritional resources. And before we wrap up, I have to ask, your breastquake, are you healed from their cancer experience?
Yeah, I've had scans every year, for 3 years. And in fact, the first time when it didn't show up, I was near Cornell in upstate New York. And the tech kept running in and out of it because she'd never seen, like, if you hadn't had surgery, how is it when they were looking at their original biopsy scans, how did you do this, without any surgery? And
Wow.
I told her, all the different things that I talk about in this book that can help detox your body. So yeah.
Wow. Dr. Galardi, you are dropping knowledge. I mean, just, you beat up a hurricane and kept it away from your house. You kicked cancer's ass and got it out of your body. And you're curing your nervous system in a time that is pretty amped up in our human experience. I'm just so grateful that you're here dropping so much knowledge. Anything you want to wrap up with before we close the podcast today?
The only thing I would say is to, in your life, take the courageous path. Even if it's scary, take the path where your energy goes up, where you find that this excites you or it interests you or you feel passionate when you talk about it. Even though it may require reorganizing your life, take the risk and you will not be sorry.
I love it. So, so true. Thank you so much for your generosity and how much you've brought to us, and blessings to you and to the entire city of Asheville as you continue to recover from cancer. I know that the blessings will be found. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.